Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Thank you. First of all, I would like to apologize because I was a little bit sick the last days and my voice is a little bit tricky, and also because I'm not the best English speaker in the conference at all. But I'm going to try to talk to you about something that is really important for me and for the experience that I have in my organization, which is diversity as one of the main important tools to confronting conflicts. As you just listened before, my name is Jorge Garrido, and I'm running a community resource called Apoyo Positivo, in English, positive support, which, among other lines of action, looking for work on diversity as a driver of social change. I'm 34 years old, and in this time I've acquired a number of experience through different opportunities where I work and also participate as a volunteer. I'll tell you a little bit about them. CISB International is a global organization dedicated to educating and inspiring for peace through building intercultural friendship, cooperation, and understanding. Founded in 1950, today we are a federation of 60-member associations with over 200 chapters or local groups. In over 60 years, we have given countless children and young people the experience of their lives and the opportunity to build lasting friendship through our international educational programs. 13 years ago, I had the opportunity to participate in an international project of 15 years old participants in the US, where I lived with over 10 different countries for a month. After that experience, everything took a turn in my life. I started a learning process on diversity that continues these days. Parallel, I studied occupational therapy and anthropology, and I started to work as a therapist in different social organizations with different groups: intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome, Alzheimer, Parkinson, immigration, women, physical handicap people, etc. Finally, ending almost 5 years ago, managing Apoyo Positivo. Life and experience are the best master of diversity. Just keeping a few considerations, we can build respect, more equity, and possible peace through diversity, resolving our conflicts in a peaceful way. But what we mean by diversity? The term diversity comes from the Latin diversitas, which refers to the difference, variety, or abundance of different things. This allows us to indicate, mark, or talk of the similarity that may have some things together, but also is useful when we want to know the abundance of different elements that coexist in a particular context. There are different types of diversity within the environment and community: cultural, sexual, biological, functional, ecological, and linguistic, finally, among the most recurrent. In the broadest sense, the term diversity might refer to biodiversity, functional diversity, sexual diversity, cultural diversity, ecological diversity, linguistic diversity, or diversity of a place, of a region. In the context of our organization, we focus into 4 areas: sexual diversity, as sexual rights and gender, functional diversity regarding disabilities, diversity and intercultural, and diversity in adulthood, senior. Our organization wants to open a space for dialogue within the concept that we understand as diversity. And although we are more than used to hearing about it in different groups on forums, however, always appears appropriate for one or other group, but not mixed, not like a network thing, with the greatest potential and the meaning of the term itself, being different. Diversity is learning, exploring, respecting the difference within a group of people or a society. It's about being conscious and reflecting on your own role in a group of society, and also reflecting on what the others do and what their roles are. It's important to appreciate that all people do not have the same opinions, want the same things, or look the same. To understand the concept of diversity is also about acknowledging our similarities and appreciating our difference. Diversity is present in all the groups we belong to. When we make good use of this variety of experience, we learn new things and become more creative. When focusing on diversity, we also get to see what potential and skills we have as human beings. If we explore our inner selves and our own identities, we develop individually and contribute to the groups as cultures we belong to. Being aware of diversity is also about thinking about the other people and being aware of discrimination and inequalities. Many of our everyday actions affect others, even we don't really think about it. What then should we as a community to empower us and realize that we are all part of that diversity? What responsibilities do we have to start the lines of work which can respond to this diversity in our society? How do we get to diversity? After the first years of emergence of HIV in our society, Apoyo Positivo came in 1993 by a group of social healthcare professionals, which did conclude that there were psychological, family, and social factors around infection to which no response was given by the health or social system, and which were just as important or more than the medical issues regarding the lives of the people living with HIV and AIDS. That's it began a community project that has already served more than 20 years and has been collecting at this time numerous social issues around, which meant mainly social HIV stigma and the most vulnerable affected groups. In this time and evolution, as an association, we discover how diverse our environment is, how our users are, and how that has shaped who we are today. The community movement of national and international response to HIV field itself reflects this. LGBT organization, patients with HIV or hepatitis, socially excluded groups such as male or female sex workers, immigration, women's association, youth, men who have sex with men, people with drug dependency, etc. Big similar difference that make normal day-to-day life in our society. From HIV response, we start to talk and care about sexual health, taboo even at this stage of our social development. And with it came indivisible sexual and affective education, not just talk about how biologically our body works and how the reproductive act is, but emotions are performed. Talking about how we feel when we like someone, we want another person, or we want to fall in love. Managing our frustrations, emotions, and develop skills that allow us to be social beings and avoid many implications beyond HIV. We're talking about issues that concern us socially, bullying, from homophobia, from appearance, or from just for being different, male violence, depression, suicides, mental health problems, etc. Problems that have a common trait, no action respecting and valuing difference and building on them. And that's how we started a while ago a new way in Apoyo Positivo, with new lines of action. Attendance and promotion of sexual health, intervention and advocacy on sexual and emotional education, defense and promoting of sexual and reproductive rights as fundamental universal human rights, and promotion of human rights, diversity, and active citizenship. From these lines of work, Apoyo Positivo has adapted his historical, more welfare-oriented programs to develop a set of activities and programs that respond to this line from prevention, education, awareness, training, and personal development. Since 2011, Positive Support leads in Madrid, and this year in all Spain, the international project Dance for Life, where we began our collaboration and brotherhood with the Dutch Embassy and country. This project, like Apoyo Positivo, was more focused on HIV prevention, and its parallel evolution has been responding to the personal development of young people and their human rights. Dance for Life allows us to reach the intervene in the right places to avoid these aforementioned social conflicts and problems, its schools and youth environments, providing its participants through a methodology based on youth culture and its elements, skills that allow them to take responsible decisions about their sexual health, be aware of the problems of other young people, of human rights and diversity, enable them to take an active role to promote citizenship and equality. And if we talk about diversity, we need to check how is diversity in the world. 1 billion of people suffer disability worldwide, 50% of the world population. 1 in 5 disabled, which is a figure of between 110 and 190 million people, must face great difficulties in their daily lives. Between 5 and 12% of the world population have traits or tendencies toward homosexuality in different studies. But what everyone agrees is the difficulty of measuring something that is not an obvious difference. And some studies are considered mailing with the binomial sexuality, which we know that does correspond with reality. We are about 7 billion people, and we estimate that 60% are women. That's more than 4 billion of women inhabit the world. And women is one of the main and historical groups not adequately recognized in our society. Also, according to statistics and studies about transgenders, more than 14 million men and more than 4,600,000 women are transsexual worldwide. That means almost 90 million of people in the world that are transgender. 100% of the global population belongs to a culture, customs, and communicates in a language. There are more than 6,900 languages worldwide, more than 50,000 different religions and beliefs, and we are almost 200 countries around the world. The proportion of elderly people is constantly increasing, from 8% in 1950 to 11% in 2009, and is expected to reach 20% of the population in 2050. Taking a simple look at the numbers, all of us belong to diversity. However, in our society, we yet punish the difference between each other. Why? As a defense mechanism? As a reaction to our own stigma? Stigmas that produce similar effects on all of us, like pain, depression, anxiety, difficulties in the development of daily life, problems of social integration. If the world population lives mostly with a difference to others, what is the theme of inequality and social conflict? Difference? Or does not recognize them? In Spain, the situation has its own peculiarities and diversity comparing to other countries. So we should watch and learn from them and overcome many of the difficulties that we currently suffer as a community. If we make a comparison of numbers and situations, we can see and find that there is almost 4 million of people that are disabled in our country, which means almost the 9% of the population in Spain. Between the 5% or 10% of students claim to have a different sexual orientation to heterosexuality. This population has the greatest suffering bullying or harassment, with a special emphasis during the school years. In fact, the students consider that they discriminate against LGBT people, and 45% of those that are LGBT have experienced first-hand discrimination and LGBT phobia. In our country, more than 22 million of people of population are female. That means more than the half of our population. An average of 600,000 women are victims of recorded violent facts in our country. Although it's difficult to know the exact number in Spain because many of them are not claimed. Different studies say around 2.5 million of women in more or less frequent was, in any moment of their life, violence victims. That means that 10% of the women living in Spain were abused in the last year. More than 3,000 people live in Spain with sex do not feel like itself. Also, Spain has 17 autonomous communities and 1 official language and 4 co-official languages. Almost 8 million of people in our country are considered elderly, old people, and also with a lot of disabilities. So what kind of challenge we have around diversity? We therefore face a primary challenge: define a common concept of diversity to collect all these and other differences that make up our society. We propose consensus lines to resolve the obstacles that allow to celebrate our diversity and convert it as an engine of equality and respect. Some days ago, we just performed a conference on diversity in Madrid, with attended by representatives of the different groups that make up the concept of diversity: disabled people, seniors, LGBT representative, gender representative, and multiculturalism. They have agreed some conclusions in order to work for a more egalitarian society. First, after a few years that human rights have been one main part of the international agenda, society has worked in an inclusive and integrationist model which has emphasized difference in strongholds without connections and real networks, which is condemning minority invisibility. Classic model of normality confronted with the diverse reality of society. Diversity itself is normality. The integrationist model is based on a ground principle: integrates a subordinate by a superior, breaking one of the bases of relations in a model of diversity, which is equality. There is a clear need for a change in communication and languages. As we will see, it's an essential element in the management of conflicts and is the basic tool of coexistence in diversity. Promote sexual and reproductive rights of all population as essential human rights for the eradication of poverty and the achievement of an egalitarian society. Give voice and leadership to the people who represent diversity to actively participate in social dialogue and influence in public policies. From these findings, we would like to share Apoyo Positivo diversity framework. You can see it on the screen right now. That can serve as basis for the formulation and definition of what is diversity to work together. As you can see, it includes different terms that we consider when we talk about diversity as variety, flexibility, respect, equality, rights, and active citizenship. If you go through the catalog or those points that we consider as diversity, you can see there is a term that means variety, which must be flexible and open about the difference that represents and reference as a value. Must be a universal value, where religious, racial, or any other kind of cultural, gender, are considered sources of wealth and no impediments. A universal value involves respect. For respect existence, pure relationships have to be in equality. For getting equality, we must empower those with difficulties. For empowerment, we need to consider all situations and interests of others to take action for the rights of all. To take actions for the rights of all, need build a fair, solidarity, and participatory society. A fair, solidarity, and participatory society is based on equality and equity rights. Equality and equity rights are possible only if feel, express, and live in diversity is considered a right. Diversity is, in fact, for us, a human right. But how diversity face conflict? First, we need to consider war is a conflict. That's more than the opposite of war. Even though war and peace are often described as opposites, not everyone agrees. Peace is not just the opposite of war. It has to do with much more than the absence of armed conflicts and tanks on the street. That's why it's not achieved neither those countries that have not been involved in for 100 years. There are different forms of violence. Direct violence is everything from war between countries to fighting and bullying. But there are also more subtle forms of violence. Structural violence is, for instance, racism, or inequalities between men and women, or the lack of sexual rights. They attack directly to diversity. You don't necessarily have peace just because the country you live isn't involved in an armed conflict with another country. Peace includes people having the things they need in order to obtain their full personal potential. It's important to remember that we all belong to a society and that we all have impact on other people's opportunities. We have an individual as well as a shared responsibility for each other. There are many definitions of peace. One of them that has a strong influence is the distinction that has been between positive and negative peace by Johan Galtung, an internationally renowned Norwegian scholar and researcher in this field. Negative peace means that there is no war, no violent conflicts between states or within states. On the other hand, positive peace means no war or violence conflict combined with a situation where there is equity, justice, and development. A high level of social justice and a minimum level of violence therefore characterize positive peace. Structural violence is when people don't have the opportunity to be in charge of their own lives and when resources are unevenly divided in the world or within a city. To make it easier to understand what structural violence is, you can look at people's access to education or food, or the difference in salaries between men and women. Having access or not having access to medical care is usually mentioned when talking about structural violence, but also other things that have to do with influencing society and the opportunity the people has to affect their own situations. Sexism, unequal treatment of people because of their gender or sexuality are other examples of structural violence. It often has to do with someone using their power over someone else, and this affects people's opportunity to grow. There can only be peace when people's different potential, skills, and rights get the same attention. It doesn't only come down to education. People must have to have a space to live their everyday lives the way that they want to. Individuals should have the right to live in the life they choose, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. That's something that promotes a well-rounded society. When people develop and feel that they are part of a society, communities strengthen. Meetings and exchange of ideas are good for all of us. Conflict is a word that we often associate with negativity. Many people view conflict as something that should be avoided and feel that if a conflict arises, it means that something is wrong. This fear of conflict is completely understandable and has a lot to do with how society perceives conflicts, a lack of tools that we receive to allow us to handle them. How do we manage the conflict then? In our organization, CISB, one of the international ones that I belong to, we call them building blocks. That means attitudes and skills to handle conflicts. Sometimes conflicts work themselves out, but often they require something to us. To ensure productive and constructive conflict resolution, there are certain things that must exist in the process. In CISB, we call these building blocks. Without this, it would be awfully difficult to begin talking about conflict management and resolution. The first block is self-awareness. Most of us do not try to create or provoke conflicts intentionally. It is more likely that we are unaware of how our behavior contributes to a conflict, especially an interpersonal conflict, involving one or more other people. Therefore, the first and most fundamental step of conflict management is self-awareness. In order to have a real understanding of conflicts, you must turn the mirror inwards and really reflect and understand how you behave, think, react, and communicate. For that reason, conflict management cannot exist without the development of self-awareness. The second block is communication. Normally, a conflict involves two or more people. Self-awareness alone is not enough for a healthy conflict management. In order for the other side to understand how you are feeling, communication is necessary. Discussing disagreements and sharing your feelings can lead to opportunities to strengthen and improve relationships. Of course, there are different ways of communicating, so there is also a question on how you communicate. And the third block is openness. Communicating how you feel in a conflict is not enough when we are looking at resolving a conflict. There must also be an openness to listen and understand the other side and their feelings and perceptions. Therefore, listening and being open are an integral part of conflict management and resolution. And if we want to face a conflict, we also need to know not only the skills that we need, but also the ingredients or elements of the conflict. Conflicts are often associated with including negative emotions. Although this might be true, there are several other elements in a conflict besides emotions. Being able to break down a conflict into these ingredients that are always involved is helpful in understanding the conflict, and even more helpful in resolving it. These ingredients are facts, are the simple objectives, not judgmental actions or lack of action that took place. As such, sides to a conflict should generally be able to agree on the facts. Does this seem hard? It is, because in most cases, people confuse the dry facts with their own personal interpretation of the facts, thus leading to many sets of facts that actually apply to one situation. It can be very hard to filter out the facts from our interpretations and feelings. Very often we mistake our feelings or interpretations for the actual facts of the conflict, especially in cases where people around us or even society agree with our interpretation of the facts. When trying to resolve a conflict, even if we are very confident that our interpretation or feelings are the correct ones, it's very important to make the distinction between facts and feelings or interpretations. Think of facts as the tofu. Tofu on its own does not have any flavor. Same with the facts. The facts on their own should not taste like anything. The second ingredient of a conflict is the feelings. As mentioned before, feelings reflect one's personal interpretation of the facts. This is why it can be that identical facts generate different feelings in different people. For example, something that might really upset or frustrate you might not frustrate your friend or colleague, even though the facts are exactly the same. Feelings are the flavor of this tofu that I just told you. That is why the same tofu can taste like chicken to you, but taste like soy sauce to another person. Feelings are how we experience a conflict. As such, they are also an indicator that the conflict exists on how escalated it is. In that sense, it's important to be in tune and listen to your own feelings, not as the truth, but as a red flag indicating that a conflict is coming or exists. If you feel annoyed with someone or angry or hurt, then you can consider this as an indicator that there could be a conflict at hand. Do not ignore your feelings or try to push them away. Use them as an identified tool, but be careful not to mistake them for facts or view them as the absolute truth. This part can be tricky in many conflicts. And the other element or ingredients of a conflict is the needs. Needs are very basic necessities that motivate us as individuals. For example, the need to be respected and valued, the need to be understood, the need to be loved, the need to be recognized. Different people have different needs of a different sensitivity to a certain need, which is exactly why two people can have a different reaction to the same set of facts. Our needs are actually the causes for the way we feel. When a need is not met, it generates feelings. A good way to think of needs is like a backpack full of things that come from our culture, our religion, our personal experience, traumas, etc. We take this backpack with us everywhere we go. So just look to a conflict and try to think about the facts, the feelings you had, and which needs were not met, and generate these feelings. Mapping out the conflict in this way, we have developing our skills to manage it. Then we could talk and analyze how to face the conflict, considering the different reactions we can have around the conflicts. This can be very much depends on the type of conflicts, the mood of the person is in, who the other person is. It's also important to know how is each person and how to react when facing a conflict. Some people hit, some people runs, or some people stands. And also it's essential to consider when the conflict escalates and how we communicate to the others as elements of the conflict management. Be aware of the conflict level and adapt the communication skills to solve it are main components to work on the conflict resolution. Conflict resolution through diversity. Throughout this lecture, we have analyzed that what is diversity and what is a conflict, from a macro view of the conflict in which only peace is seen as the absence of war, to a daily life conflict, which conditions and market, as we have seen, social inequalities across different types of violence. The daily conflict is substantially based on diversity and specifically attacks it, not celebrating and respecting the richness of it, which contributes to a better community sustainability and personal development. Violence gains emotions, and the relationship of this with our diversity is the key point to achieve and work towards peace. Each day a person interacts with their immediate environment and their daily life confront with diversity of people with whom they live. In a similar cultural context, the confrontation will be minor, but there are two factors that are revolutioning the concept of diversity and make it easier to manage in our society. Those are globalization and internet and social networks. Globalization, the term, is derived from the word globalize, which refers to emergence of an international network of social and economic systems. Globalization can thus be defined as the intensification of worldwide social relations which link distant localities in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. It is the process of international integration arising from the interchange of world views, products, ideas, and other aspects of culture. This has enabled better knowledge between each other and enjoys, learn, and internalize this difference. But also international social networks have a role. The communication boom that internet and social networks meant enriched the necessary communication between different into order to resolve conflicts. It's a tool that facilitates sharing over the administrative and structural barriers that we have created as society in a more transparent manner, working towards a more equitable, peaceful, and respectful society. The key to managing conflict is precisely to know this difference and consider precisely all these realities that diversity allows us to see and offers. When we get in the same situation of equality, the same options to participate at the same level in conflict resolutions, when we celebrate the diversity and understand that we all have the same rights, when we respect that principle, we will be able to find in the conflict what is needed to grow as a society. We will find in it the changing social process and achieving a more egalitarian, respectful, just as peaceful society. So it makes much sense to apply in our life a phrase that we use often from one of our CISB educational materials. If you think you are too small to have an impact, try to sleep with a mosquito in your room. I would like to thank all the audience and also the conference to consider my participation on it. As you said before, the most part of the speakers are related to diplomacy and not to the social community, and it's essential that someone from our field can be here talking about the process of peace building and conflict resolution. So thank you so much for the consideration, and to all of you for listening. And if you have any question, I'm going to start with the beginning about why diversity is starting for us to consider it as a human right. If you think about human rights, the basic one is to be yourself, as you said before, just say. And diversity is the same line of connection between being yourself and respect also the other difference on the people around you. That's why we consider it. Yeah, I understand what you meant, but also we want to consider it close to like the list of the new conception of human rights, like when we start to consider sexual rights and reproductive rights inside the list of official human rights. We also consider that diversity is like a transversal or cross line between all of them. Maybe it's not the same thing to say it's a human right, but it's like a transversal thing to talk about. And what we're considering during the last years is that we were talking about diversity in our own group, like If I'm part of a migrants group, we talk about our diversity as multicultural group. If I'm part of a sexual diversity group, I talk about sexual diversity, but I don't think or I don't look at the other's diversities. So one of the things that we start to think that maybe that effort or that things that we can make to change the situation around is to change the model of look at the diversity. In the past, we look at the diversity like you are different from the normality, and we are going to use like a integrationist model to include you in the society. But in that way, you are not considering, in fact, the difference of that person because you are not considering your own difference. You are like acting under a common model of normality, which is like giving an invisibility to those differences. So we started to work in an opposite way, like we are going to celebrate the difference that we have, but we are going to use it to also not to be so different, not to look for also the similar things that we all have together and celebrating what is different in us, but also looking for the common lines of peace and peace building or conflict resolution in the similarities we have. If you look in a small different way, when you face things, maybe it's a solution. For us, for my organization, was a success to organize the last conference 1 week ago here in Madrid. It was the first time that in Spain we mixed the different diversity groups. It's the first time that we had a conference in which you could find handicapped people, sexual diversity representative, gender representative, multicultural, and we all have like their own different preoccupations, like things that they are like really aware of their own collective, but also there is a lot of like claims or needs that were common, and also we all were considering like common lines of work or ideas to solve this problem, and all of them were around mix our work to be more connected, because the past model of inclusion was like making those differences apart from each other. And this new way of working, like being more close to the other audience, the other groups, it's easier to focus or to face the conflict and to solve it, to have more skills and to get a better knowledge of the world to resolve a conflict. And of course, there is not like the same kind of equality as you say, or the same change, like opportunities to have equality in the different places around the world. So the situation is completely different on that diversity. But at least to having like a model in your mind, knowing that you can find these problems of being involved or being part of an equity society, you can understand better why you are not, if you are like the different one. But also that don't mean that it's like the right situation, no? Or the right environment, and many things probably had to change in those places where you are like the cultural shock one when you get there. But also having this perspective of diversity, like considering those differences like yours and work together on that, I think it's not easy, and it's not something that is going to happen tomorrow, but it's probably one new way of getting peace building and conflict resolution. And also because I strongly believe that when we started to talk about the new Declaration of Human Rights in 1994, when we set the Millennium Goals, I think that the world for the first time started to look at the human being as a focus, as the thing that we need to think about it. And then is when diversity comes out, like considering some rights, like real rights, like sexual and reproductive rights, like women's rights, that were not considered in the past, and they were like blocking the real situation of diversity and peaceful environment in our society. That's why we consider it, in a way, a human right, but it's also, as I've been talking before, like a cross-transversal thing between rights or human rights. I think those different things are part of our own difference and our culture back home, no? When we are talking about our country or our local issues. That's also something that we had to consider when we are talking about like peace building, conflict resolution, and diversity. But it's not the same for me that I live in Madrid, the tradition of my family, my religion, or my background, than the most part of the people that is coming to Spain from 10 years to now, coming from different countries, and having different cultural background, also regarding marriage, regarding having babies, or the shape of a couple, how it's to be, woman, man, is completely different. But that does not mean that any of them is more important than the other ones. It's just needed that I consider and I value your cultural background as the same way that I consider mine. If for me it's a value to respect and love another person, it doesn't matter the gender of that person and the culture that that person is coming from, it has to be the same importance that if you want to get married earlier than me, or you want to consider another family model or society, but it's not a conflict if I'm not getting into your own decisions and difference, like trying to attack them or avoid them because I think that they are not the right ones. What also we consider that is really, really important, because you were talking about education in youth, we consider that the schools and the educational places have to be something for everyone. And it means that you don't need to set a model of culture and society in the places where the people has to grow up being themselves. So you need to consider the information that you share with youth in the process of getting educated, not only regarding maths or biology or something like that, also regarding how to be yourself in the world, how to get those skills, to take, we always say, to take responsible actions or answer to their lives. That not means, for instance, that if I explain you what is sexual rights or human rights, you are going to be married in 1 month, or you are going to get sex right after I explain you what is your rights. That means that you are going to have the skills and the knowledge enough to consider all this information with your personal background and decide if you want to get married before or after, if you want to have a kind of life or another kind of life. But at least I think that we need to share and consider all those values in the process of personal development and growth, because it's when after that, when we don't give that information to our students, our teenagers, is when we see the lack of those tools and knowledge right after when they grow up. But also I think that that's my personal opinion, it's not from my organization. I strongly believe that we didn't have an inclusion model for migrants in our country, in Spain. Many people was coming to Spain because Spain opens the door to get people for getting those kind of works and to help supposedly the growing of our country. And now, as you say, that is not needed. Many people is coming back to their countries or thinking about moving to another new country because of this situation. But it's also a part of the non-inclusion model, the real inclusion model that we were focusing in Spain. I mean, if we really were integrating the people that was coming from other countries, considering the difference that for us or for me and my organization, it's reachful to consider if one person has different values and also a different moral, because it's coming from their feelings, as we said before, their needs, and the culture, religion, and all those things. And also, because I said before, that don't mean that one thing is better than the other one. That's the equality, try to consider and to see each other in the same level. Probably, if Europe, and especially countries as Spain, were considering the difference between the minorities and the different countries coming to our country to contribute in the future of us, probably the situation would be completely different. Because many other people have a chain to be part of this society. It's not easy to find people from immigration groups that they get to university as the same level that the Spanish population, for instance. And that's why we don't have a open education in our country. Another problem that we just collect 2 years ago was the new law that the government set, for which people that is not working, and it's not Spanish, but also Spanish that are not working, they don't have access to the health system. When health is one of the basic human rights. So if you want to integrate someone in your society, you cannot only open the doors that you want to, you also can bring everything that is a basic and a need for a person living in a society. So if an immigrant comes to your country, participate and contribute on it, it has to have rights to have education, to have health, and to have their own spaces to live their moral, their different structures, and their personal points of view. If especially they don't fight between each other, no? We need to find that, like you said before, like equality or average, to combine the different backgrounds of personal points of views and experience, to respect everyone, to leave spaces for every different belief or thought, but also to combine them to get a better understanding and a more richful society after all.